So for this section, we are going to talk about getting down to the roots of sexual violence, kind of how it came through history, different aspects that have either supported sexual violence, gone against sexual violence that didn't work. We'll cover it all in this section. This is a lengthy section, so take your time, really grasp the information that we are giving you. All right, so oppression. Oppression is the systematic and institutionalized mistreatment of one group of people by another group of people based on historical and current structures in society. We're excluded from resources, benefits, and other opportunities in society that other groups may have more of an advantage at. Just some of the examples is sexism, racism, ableism, ageism, heterosexism, and classism. We have talked previously about power and privilege. Essentially, we're going back to this again. Privilege is special immunities, rights, or benefits enjoyed by individuals or groups. This can be economic, social, psychological validations and rewards enjoyed by other people or groups, and which leads to the prejudiced society that one group is better than another group. Examples: maleness, whiteness, heterosexuality, able-bodiedness, and gender conforming. So, working assumptions in the history of sexual violence. The experience of those targeted by oppression is very different from those who have benefited from oppression, but oppression keeps us separated and fearful from each other. No matter what type of family we came from, we're still taught prejudices from the larger culture. The system of oppression was in place before we were born. Learning about having advantages over others can be a major shocker and guilt instiller because we have been taught to believe these things, especially when it comes to the American dream. It is a level playing field. You have to work hard, you have to get ahead, but it isn't always the case. However, feeling guilty often helps people from addressing oppression because of the emotion is so great. They just can't grasp in their mind that, they've had things better than other people and they feel guilty and they just can't get over that guilt. Continuing with the working assumptions. Oppression operates in different ways depending on the category. Trying to rank one group's pain over another often distracts us and prevents us from dismantling any and all oppression. This does not negate the fact that some people are more disadvantaged than others, especially when it comes to multiple identities that are oppressed. For example, a person of color and transgender, a woman of color and lesbian. Audre Lorde, a woman of color and lesbian, wrote that there is no hierarchy of oppression. I have learned that sexism and heterism both arise from the same source as racism. This is from a handout, There's No Hierarchy of Oppression by Audre Lorde, that participants will receive. All of us are targeted in our youth and may experience it later in life. Everyone is in different places with these concepts, attitudes, and beliefs, but we want to encourage people to learn, to discomfort, and grow. And we all come in with the good intentions of helping people or doing the best we can, but really we just need to work harder, but realize, sometimes we do have better things and have a way of life better than others. This part is just real short and brief. So essentially we must work together to eliminate all forms of oppression. But this is work that is hard and may seem like an endless battle, but oftentimes we've seen, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So, how do people use oppression and sexual violence? Well, there's multiple ways. One is a tool of war. Two is silence and shame. Three is fear. Four is activities are restricted. Low self of worth. And 6, reduce or inhibit access to personal power and social resources. A lot of times, and we see this a lot with sexual violence, and where domestic violence is included, is the partner or the offender, perpetrator, may withhold this person and have this control over them that they can't access those social resources. They may not be able to access their friends like we would be able to. And that's just something we need to realize. The perpetrator is really oppressing them to make them feel like they have no control over these situations. Words as weapons in sexual violence and oppression. We use words to express, right? So just like offenders and perpetrators, they're using their words to put victims and survivors in their place, technically. And again, it's just going back to the roots, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt me. But really, those words really hurt. The language of everyone is grounded with a common purpose, and especially when it comes to perpetrators, it's to degrade, dehumanize, and make violence more acceptable. Every type of oppression relies on hateful words and stereotypes. Women are called vile names, and it really comes down to how to fix those words, and because we shouldn't be called those words, right? But this also goes to people with disabilities, called names such as retard or cripple. They don't like those names. We wouldn't like those names if we were in those positions. So really, the words that we have maybe heard in society, maybe we even grew up using these words, we really have to work on changing our language when it comes to working with victims, but also working with society and getting them to get rid of these words, really. Words can also be oppressive and unintentional in ways that those with privilege may be unaware of the impact of those words that they are saying. This next one is the path of oppression. This is more self-explanatory. So when we're talking about prejudice, we're talking about feelings that come from those thoughts or stereotypes maybe we learned as growing up. Discrimination, actions stem from ones based on prejudice. And then we have oppression, the institutionalized and the societal policies that have been set and normalized. And these all start with our everyday stereotypes. Maybe we grew up believing, we believed over time, that kind of thing. And essentially they are assumptions because they haven't been proven to us, really. When things are proven to us, we then start believing. And if we're not getting all the correct information, things get totally out of whack. So this is kind of going into how our country has taught the history, what your beliefs are, and, you know, maybe everything you learned isn't what it seemed. Maybe they didn't go into the whole deep truth. And eventually you'll see how this connects to sexual violence. So, I don't know about you, but I learned that Christopher Columbus discovered America. Well, he did not discover America. There were already people living here. Native American people. Natives were raped, driven west, and massacred. And Columbus Day is still a national holiday celebrated because he found our country. Africans were enslaved and enforced from their homelands by the millions to serve as the backbone of an economy based on enslavement and forced labor. Key term, forced. Black women were routinely raped by white slave owners, and it wasn't a crime. So as you saw, I did skip a couple slides there on the audio here. And really, I just want you to think about them. Think about them, reflect on them, and that will be part of your worksheet, is to kind of reflect on those slides that I skipped, because I really want you to think. And so I'm going into this one, and it's blame the victim. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Not that easy. You can't just pull yourself up and get up and function. Like, this is part of who you are in your history. Just like we're talking about the history of sexual violence. History can't be erased. History can't be taken off and thrown in the trash. Like, it's there and you can't ignore it. Sexual violence, oppression, the feed on silence. Society continues to support the continuation of oppression and sexual violence through ignoring it, minimalizing it, and denying it. We tolerate racist, sexist, ageist, and oppressive jokes. The gay jokes, the blonde jokes, the old people jokes. And, well, you or I may not find them offensive, but people around us may find them offensive. We don't address racism, heterosexism in companies around the U.S., but even in our area, it's not addressed, which it does need to be, of course. We accept how the media portrays people in sexual violence. A good example is the movie Roll Red Roll, where radio DJ essentially portrays these boys as good people, good athletes, and why are they getting in trouble for this? So just looking at that, how the media portrays sexual violence, while it is changing with the #MeToo movement, this definitely still needs a lot of work. So, oppression with the sexual violence movement. Oppression still operates in social justice movements to this day. We have a lot of services, and it's really, even in our office is the majority of white Caucasian women. And we do have one man, Michael, can't forget you. So anyways, but the whole point is that there's still oppression in social justice movements. We still haven't been able to get past this. The work of the anti-rape movement was largely beneficial to white victims. Models have been created to benefit the white women, and especially with the focus in the criminal justice system. The relation, how to get rid of the oppression for the LGBTQ victim assistance is still very lacking. So, historical trauma. This is really important, especially in the work we do, because even though we may not be directly responsible for what happened in the past, we still have a form of responsibility. If we want to work towards ending sexual violence, we have to work towards ending all forms of oppression. So when we look at historical trauma, just like it says here, it's the collective emotional and psychological injury, both over the lifespan and across generations, resulting from a catalytic history of genocide. Multi-generational trauma. It's essentially what it says. It occurs when trauma is not resolved, subsequently internalized, and passed on from one generation to the next. If sexual assault happens in one generation, and there's so much trauma for that, and moves into the next generation, it's like the domino effect. It just keeps going and going and never ends until someone puts an end to it. Symptoms of trauma. Higher suicide rate, higher mortality rate, higher alcoholism, substance abuse rates, domestic violence, child abuse, low self-esteem. They may also have anxiety and stress-related illnesses, anger, shame, fear and distrust, isolation, discomfort around oppressor or abuser, or events that might remind them of what happened to them. So these next few slides, I want you to read them over and just really, again, just think about them. Think about the generations of trauma and grief that these groups have endured. And again, on your worksheet, I will have you really looking in depth and thinking in depth about these groups and their multi-generational and historical trauma. All right. So, why do we need to know this? Why do you need to know this? So, the relevant past has to do with current oppressive conditions, underlying myths, and a version of history told by targeted groups that aren't necessarily true, right? Understanding why some survivors may not be happy about an advocate meeting with them. Sometimes, we do run into, for example, American Indian survivors don't want to meet with us, right? We're not the same race as them, or we don't look like them, or We may not understand their culture and the history that has affected them. So they just may not feel comfortable. And I think that's just something we need to realize and understand. Understanding why some survivors may not want to report to police, use medical facilities, or utilize services in general. Finally, so we continue to try and do work to dismantle the sexual violence and oppression. So in order to be victim-centered, we must really work against oppression. So that way, not only can we better serve the communities we serve, but we can, build strength within these communities. The reality of sexual violence includes the reality of colonialism, slavery, racism, classism, and ableism. So just realizing those are real. And we must reflect on the reality of all women's experiences. Whether it was yourself, your mom, your sister, your cousin, your aunt, your grandma, just reflecting on those experiences that we have gone through.